experiment, we are going to study the nitrogen cycle in nature. The material required for this purpose is a model or a chart of nitrogen cycle. This is a chart showing the nitrogen cycle in nature. So the nitrogen cycle mainly involves about how the element nitrogen is cycled through nature from its inorganic state to organic compounds and then back to the inorganic state so that the balance in nature is maintained. So the first step involved in nitrogen cycle is nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation means converting the atmospheric nitrogen into a usable form which can be taken up by the plants. Nitrogen is one of the most inert elements that we have, and therefore no organism can directly use the atmospheric nitrogen uh, to assimilate it in its body, except for a few bacteria which have this special ability. So if you look at the figure, you can see that air has 78% of nitrogen gas. Means if you look at the composition of the atmosphere, it is about 78% of nitrogen. Now, the process by which this nitrogen is converted into usable form in the soil is known as nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation can happen in three different ways. The first process is known as biological fixation. You can see these bacteria. So the bacteria that are present in the soil, not all, but a few, like we discussed in the previous experiment, that the nitrogen fixing bacteria which reside in the root nodules of leguminous plants and some free living bacteria such as Clostridium, they have this special ability by which they can convert the nitrogen gas from the air into nitrogenous compounds in the soil. So most of these compounds are in the form of nitrates. Once the nitrates have been formed in the soil, plants absorb these nitrates in the form of ions along with water with the help of their roots and build proteins. The animals, they feed on plants and plant products, and that is how this nitrogen enters the body of the plants, of the animal, sorry. And this entire process is known as nitrogen assimilation. So the first process was nitrogen fixation, and the second process is nitrogen assimilation. So this is nitrogen assimilation, how the nitrogen is imbibed into the body mass of plants and animals. So this is one way by which fixation can happen. But not only this, whenever lightning strikes, whenever there is thunder and lightning, then also the atmospheric nitrogen combines with oxygen that is present in the air, and when it rains, it falls down to the ground in the form of nitrates. So in addition to this, there is a third way also, that is known as industrial fixation, where fertilizer manufacturing industries, they use nitrogen and manufacture ammonia artificially, which is then available in the market in the form of nitrogenous fertilizer. So that is another way by which atmospheric nitrogen can be converted to nitrates, which are then added to the soil. Now after this, when the animals they excrete urine which contains urea, which is again a nitrogenous compound, and when these excreta of animals is decomposed by certain microorganisms, it gets converted into ammonium compounds, which are then again further broken down. So the process of conversion of the nitrogenous excretory products of animals into ammonium compounds by certain bacteria is known as ammonification. Going down further, once the ammonia has been formed, the process of conversion of ammonia into nitrites and then back to nitrates is known as nitrification. And later on, these nitrites and these nitrates, again, there are certain special bacteria present in the soil which release them back to the atmosphere in the form of nitrogen gas, and the process is known as denitrification. So for this you can, so to summarize the nitrogen cycle, these are a few points that you can write. The first step is nitrogen fixation, which can happen in three different ways. The process of conversion of atmospheric nitrogen to nitrates in the soil. It can happen by atmospheric fixation, it can happen biologically, or it can happen through industrial fixation. The second step is nitrogen assimilation, which involves the building up of body mass of plants and animals with the help of nitrogen in the form of plant proteins and animal proteins. The third step is ammonification, which involves the excretion of nitrogenous waste materials by animals and the decomposition of dead remains of plants and animals, which are then converted to ammonium compounds by certain microorganisms. The fourth step is nitrification, where the ammonia formed is then converted to nitrites and nitrates again by a different kind of bacteria which are present in the soil. And the last step is denitrification, which involves the conversion of these nitrogenous compounds back to atmospheric nitrogen again by certain bacteria and fungi, which help in returning the nitrogen back to the atmosphere. So that completes the cycle.